Tantor Audio presents The Diabetes Solution: How to Control Type 2 Diabetes and Reverse Prediabetes Using Simple Diet and Lifestyle Changes by Jorge E. Rodriguez, MD, and Susan Wyler, RDN. Narrated by Mike Chamberlain. Publisher's Note: This audiobook is packaged with bonus material, which has been included on the first audio and MP3 CD. If you downloaded this audiobook in a digital format, please visit Tantor.com and type The Diabetes Solution into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page, then click on PDF Extra 1. When prompted, enter the access code INSULIN to access the bonus material. If you encounter any issues downloading the PDF, please email customer service at Tantor.com for assistance. Introduction. My father was a closet diabetic. I always knew he had high blood sugar, but no disease was ever mentioned in the family. It wasn't until I was in the middle of writing this book that something clicked, and I asked my mom whether my dad had been diabetic. He took insulin twice a day, she said. I was astonished. I am a physician, a specialist in internal medicine, who should have known his father's medical history. But it wasn't until she divulged this information that it all started to make sense. In his disease progression, my father was the stereotypical candidate for type 2 diabetes. During his youth, he was a thin, baseball-playing, athletic, Errol Flynn look-alike, a very handsome, dynamic man. As he aged, however, he stopped exercising and became sedentary. He began to develop the midlife paunch common to so many men. When he was in his late 40s, he had his first heart attack. By the time he was 60, he had developed congestive heart failure, and he died of cardiac arrest within the year. Losing him broke my heart. My dad was 1 in a million, and 20 years later, I still miss him very much. As a physician, I know that more than 50% of diabetes sufferers end up dying of cardiovascular disease. But I also know that if we screen for the disease and catch it early, we have many tools to help reverse it while it is still in its incipient stage, which we call prediabetes. Once this condition has advanced to full-blown type 2 diabetes, these same tools and many medications are invaluable for lowering the elevated blood sugar that is the hallmark of the disease, as well as helping to prevent or control long-term side effects. I can't help but wonder how much of what happened to my father could have been prevented or put off for years if his diabetes had been treated earlier or if he had changed his lifestyle. The same can be asked about 80 million Americans who are living with type 2 diabetes, not to speak of the roughly 25 million who have the disease and don't know it. Because diabetes develops slowly and doesn't hurt, far too many people are unaware they are suffering from this silent killer. Most of us would prefer to look the other way when it comes to dealing with an unpleasant health issue. Because screening is not mandatory, and many people skip their annual physicals, it's easy for blood sugar to creep up, along with blood pressure and weight, without any healthcare professional sounding an alarm. And not all doctors choose to discuss weight with their patients. A pity, because overweight and obesity go hand in hand with type 2 diabetes, which is why the disease is running rampant. I'd like to put a stop to that. It's our goal in this book to explain in very clear language not just what diabetes is and how it progresses, but more important, what can be done to control it. I don't want one more person to go through what my father suffered. Treatment plans for type 2 diabetes or prediabetes must be individually tailored. Because I can't see all of you as patients, I've teamed up with colleague Susan Wyler, a registered dietitian in private practice who also teaches in the Graduate Nutrition Department of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Together, we've created a comprehensive toolkit that offers the broadest possible range of information on type 2 diabetes. This holistic approach, based on the very latest in scientific research, is most effective because it helps you take charge of your care in partnership with your physician. Between the two of us, we are widely versed in medical treatment of type 2 diabetes, as well as the lifestyle modifications that are most effective for controlling the disease. Proper nutrition, weight loss, physical activity, stress reduction, and diabetes self-management education techniques. Everything you need to halt your disease and prolong your life. All these factors add up to the Diabetes Solution, a compilation of medical treatments and lifestyle behaviors that have been proven in scientific studies to improve health in the present and prevent complications in the future. Chapter by chapter, throughout this book, we explain each of them in detail, one step at a time. It is our fervent wish that you take this information and apply what is relevant to your life. We hope that the comprehensiveness and breadth of the advice will help you better understand your disease and how it can most effectively be treated. If this causes you to have a better dialogue with your health professional, then we have done a good job. Remember, no book can take the place of a doctor. Use the information you find here to help yourself and to become a more educated patient. The Diabetes Solution is not meant to be a substitute for your doctor. It's meant to be an informative guide that will help you partner with your doctor for the very best results possible. As a physician with more than 30 years of clinical experience, I have found that patients are much more likely to take their medications correctly or change their unhealthy habits if they understand why doing so is important. My main tool as a doctor is not medication, it is persuasion, and my most powerful weapon is scientifically proven truths. I know that when I explain, in clear, simple terms, just what diabetes is, what harm the disease can cause, and how we can stop the damage, you will do the right thing for yourself. I have faith in you. The Diabetes Solution is your biggest ally. Throughout this book, you will learn to understand what type 2 diabetes is, why it occurs, what damage it causes, and how you can prevent it. Together, Susan Wyler and I have devised a three-pronged attack: knowledge, medication, and lifestyle. Undoubtedly, if lifestyle changes alone can control your diabetes, that is the best choice. But some people can't make the adjustments. They try to lose weight, but often fall back. Many just think about it. Soon, months turn into years, and they are still obese. In the meantime, irreparable kidney damage or nerve damage may have taken place, just to name a couple of common complications of diabetes. This really is a matter of life and death. If you can't change your lifestyle or your blood sugar remains high, medication is your best friend. I stress the importance of diabetes drugs, including insulin where needed, until you get the diet and lifestyle changes underway. To help you there, we've developed a whole range of suggestions to improve your health. But the crown jewel of this book is the blood sugar budget, a balanced way of eating that represents the healthiest diet for almost everyone and the most effective way for those with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes to lower their blood sugar and lose weight. You'll be surprised how much good food awaits you. The Diabetes Solution offers everything you need to know about type 2 diabetes and its precursor, prediabetes, neatly and clearly outlined. It is designed to be a tool that you can use practically, referring to it daily in conjunction with treatment recommended by your personal healthcare professional. I hope that the Diabetes Solution will inspire you, encourage you, and keep you on track. Here's wishing you a long and healthy life. Jorge E. Rodriguez, M.D. Part 1. Know Your Enemy. Chapter 1. Understanding Type 2 Diabetes. We are at war here on U.S. soil. Everyone knows the name of the enemy, but very few people can identify it, let alone describe what it looks like. I'm talking about the diabetes epidemic. At first, it may seem like I am being overly dramatic. After all, it's only diabetes. That is part of the problem. Diabetes has become such a familiar word and popular media topic that we tend to underestimate its impact and take it for granted. Well, try to ignore these facts. It is estimated that prediabetes and type 2 diabetes affect more than 50 million people in the United States and are directly responsible for more than 250,000 deaths per year. You thought I was exaggerating about being at war? Think again. Here is another alarming statistic. Diabetes is the 7th leading cause of death in America. And that rank should actually be higher, because more than half the people with diabetes actually die from cardiovascular disease, to which diabetes strongly contributes. But the staggering statistics of diabetes don't end here. Type 2 diabetes is associated with both aging and excess body weight. As the population gets fatter and fatter, and the median age climbs rapidly with the maturation of the baby boomers, this once relatively rare condition has turned into a full-blown epidemic. Plus, type 2 diabetes can affect anyone and potentially everyone. It does, however, favor certain populations. African Americans, Hispanics, excepting Cuban Americans, and Native Americans are at greater risk. Asians born in America have an elevated risk of diabetes as well. Whether this is purely a genetic factor, or more likely a combination of genetic tendency and lifestyle, especially diet, has not been fully established. An epidemic is measured not only in the number of people it affects, but also in the amount of damage it causes. I have already mentioned how many people die from type 2 diabetes, but the number of people who suffer permanent health damage is also staggering. Damage to the kidneys from type 2 diabetes is the leading cause of end-stage renal disease in the United States. When the kidneys can no longer function properly, patients are forced into dialysis, filtering the blood through a machine 3 or 4 times a week. They have to follow a very strict diet, and if they are late in getting their regular dialysis, it can be very painful. Am I trying to paint a very bleak picture just to scare you? No. But I am trying to paint a realistic picture so you can confront this disease early on while it's still very treatable. That is what distinguishes type 2 diabetes from so many other chronic diseases. You can manage it and prevent or mitigate future complications. But to do so, first you have to know whether or not you have it. Who, me? A few months ago, a very prominent personality disclosed on a television interview show that he had diabetes. Initially, I thought this was great, because it would increase awareness about the illness. Instead, this person blew it off with a joke and basically stated that it was not a big deal and could be treated with diet and exercise. No medical intervention needed. This nonchalant attitude really put me off. Unfortunately, such blasé dismissal of the disease is not new. But with this book, we do hope to teach people to take diabetes seriously. I remember being an intern at the University of Miami. During those long nights we were on call, we would admit dozens of people who were critically ill. We would start patients on treatment for their illnesses, and we would also have to brush up and learn everything about their diseases. because early the next morning we would present the case to our attending professors. Not only was it imperative that we knew all the facts about their condition, but if we wanted to succeed with our supervising professors, we had to make sure we offered the correct treatment. This is how we were judged. This is how we become physicians. I clearly remember the case of one woman who was obese, had signs of kidney damage, and kept complaining that her feet were numb. At the same time, she told me she had no pre-existing conditions and was not taking any medications. When I presented my case to my attending physician, he looked at me a bit skeptically. My presentation did not make sense to him. When he went to see the portly woman, all he had to ask was one question that clarified the whole situation. He looked at her calmly and asked, "Are you taking any injections?" She responded, "Oh, sure, insulin for my diabetes." I was stunned. Not only did it look as if I had not been thorough, but also the patient was so matter-of-fact about her diabetes that she didn't consider it a disease, and she didn't consider her insulin a medication. That is why we are writing this book. Not only is diabetes one of the most common diseases in the United States, but it is also one of the most misunderstood and ignored. The fact that you have chosen to listen to this book is a great start. It shows that you want to inform yourself. Whatever your connection to type 2 diabetes, I'm glad you're listening to this book. Because the disease is a silent killer that usually comes on gradually and in its early stages often causes no obvious symptoms. In fact, it's estimated that 1 in 3 people suffering from the disease don't even know they have it. If high blood sugar hurt, type 2 diabetes would have been brought under control decades ago. But in its initial stages, hyperglycemia, or elevated sugar in the blood, is painless and may not display obvious symptoms for some time. Only laboratory tests will detect elevated blood glucose levels, and not everyone is screened regularly. Many people lack healthcare coverage, and of those who do have it, not everyone goes for a general physical every year. The good news is that if identified, type 2 diabetes is highly responsive to diet, exercise, and stress reduction. How many chronic diseases can be controlled through lifestyle modifications? I want you to pay attention to the advice that follows, because it really is effective. And the same techniques used to lessen the effects of diabetes once it has developed can also help prevent it in the first place. I'm so excited about what we have to say that I'm afraid I'm going too quickly already. Let's start with the basics. What is diabetes? My simple definition of diabetes is this. Diabetes is a disease characterized by abnormally high levels of blood glucose due to the body's decreased production of or decreased sensitivity to insulin. This may not make a lot of sense right now, but by the end of this book, you will know what diabetes is, what causes it, what kinds of damage it does, and most important, what you can do to stop its progression or cure it completely. So pay attention and learn as much as you can, because you know what they say, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. The best thing you can do to conquer this manageable chronic disease is to understand clearly how it works and how you can attack it most efficiently and effectively. Putting your head in the sand is not a good strategy. If you've already received a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes from your doctor, chances are you had one of the following reactions. As I've said, in its early stages, this insidious disease has subtle symptoms and produces no pain. So if you're not really familiar with diabetes, your response may be very offhand. Okay, so what? If I ignore it or stop eating so many sweets, it will go away. I don't want to take any more pills, no matter what. Maybe there is something I can do that doesn't involve medication. I've got a lot of time to deal with this. It doesn't bother me and I don't have any symptoms, so I really don't care. For those who are familiar with the disease because it runs in the family, or who have a friend who is diabetic, it's a very different story. Their reaction may be one of sheer terror, especially if they've seen the disease leading to amputation of a foot or major limb. Fully 60% of leg amputations in the United States are attributed to complications from diabetes. Such fear can motivate, but it can also be paralyzing. The key to healing power is knowledge. There are basically two main types of diabetes. We physicians, in our infinite wisdom, have decided to call them type 1 and type 2. Susan and I debated for a long time whether this book should be about both types of diabetes. In the end, we decided to focus on type 2 diabetes, not because we think it is a more important or more serious disease than type 1 diabetes, but because it affects many more people. 95% of people diagnosed with diabetes have type 2, and this acquired type stands a much greater chance of being controlled with measures other than just medications. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes are quite distinct from each other. Type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. In other words, for whatever reason, the body's own immune system has turned on itself and destroyed some of its own cells. In the case of type 1 diabetes, very specific cells found in the pancreas called beta cells have been destroyed. The job of the beta cells is to produce a hormone called insulin, which is required for the body to use the carbohydrates we eat as a source of energy. Without insulin, the sugar floats aimlessly in the blood, causing damage to small blood vessels. People with type 1 diabetes usually are diagnosed when they are very young. They also tend to have much higher blood sugar levels than people with type 2 diabetes, and are much more likely to go into a state of what's called ketoacidosis. In diabetes, the body cannot efficiently use glucose as an energy source, and so instead it uses fat. That may sound like a great idea at first, but unfortunately, ketones are very harmful to the body. They are acidic and cause quick damage to our organs. Type 1 diabetes can also create extraordinarily high levels of blood glucose, which may cause someone to fall into a high blood sugar coma. Though diet and exercise may help, almost without exception, type 1 diabetes must be treated with insulin. Type 2 diabetes. In very simple terms, type 2 diabetes is a condition in which the pancreas does not produce enough insulin, or, especially when paired with obesity, the insulin that is being produced is not doing its job. In the latter case, the body does not respond to the insulin signal because too much abdominal fat stands in its way. We call this insulin resistance. In a body that is functioning normally, carbohydrates in food are broken down into glucose, the body's primary source of fuel for producing energy. Glucose is then carried by the blood to cells throughout the body. With the help of insulin, cells absorb glucose from the blood and use it to make energy. In people with type 2 diabetes, however, no matter how much sugar they eat, their cells don't receive the fuel they need to produce energy. What does it actually mean when your doctor gives you a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes? Well, most immediately, it signifies that you have abnormally high blood sugar. There is extra sugar circulating in your bloodstream, a higher concentration than the normal range of 64 to 99 milligrams per deciliter. So-called pre-diabetics register in the higher range of 100 to 125 milligrams per deciliter. A concentration of 126 milligrams per deciliter or higher indicates that diabetes is present. It's the irony of this disease that although its hallmark is too much sugar in the blood, thus high blood sugar, the glucose that is floating around cannot get into the cells where it is needed. So even though people with type 2 diabetes may eat a lot, perhaps even too much, they are not fueling their body. Therefore, fatigue, lethargy, and hunger are common symptoms. As we've said, type 2 diabetes is by far the most common type, accounting for about 95% of all diabetes. Type 2 diabetes usually occurs in adults, which is why it used to be called adult-onset diabetes. One reason there are an estimated more than 25 million cases of this disease in adult Americans over 20 is that this type of diabetes is strongly associated with obesity. In adults 65 years and older, it is estimated that almost 27% have diabetes and 50% have prediabetes, the milder precursor of diabetes, which we explain in detail in Chapter 3. Type 2 diabetes and overweight, obesity are inextricably linked. The country's obesity epidemic has opened the doors to type 2 diabetes on a scale never before imagined. What is even scarier is that the full effects, both physical and financial, of the present diabetes epidemic will not be felt for decades. Though it's true that only 15% of overweight or obese people will go on to develop diabetes, when you multiply this by the 68% of the population that is overweight, plus include the 50% of those obese individuals with a body mass index, BMI, of 30 or higher, the numbers are huge, close to 50 million. With the aging and fattening of America, these statistics are expected to rise sharply in the near future. And with so many teens and even children overweight and obese, we're seeing more and more diabetes in this age group, which we healthcare professionals find shocking. In the past, the only kind of diabetes we used to see in young people was type 1, or so-called childhood diabetes. The times they are a-changin', and not in a good way. Unlike type 1 diabetes, which can eventually result in total depletion of the body's supply of insulin and often causes tremendous thirst and dramatic weight loss, type 2 can fester silently for years, doing internal damage to many organs without anyone knowing. Eventually, when blood sugar levels are high enough and the body can no longer compensate, symptoms much like those of type 1 diabetes will appear. I like to say that the most common symptom of type 2 diabetes is no symptom at all, because people can have the disease for years and be oblivious of the damage it is doing. But if symptoms do arise, they may include one or more of the following: persistent tingling in the legs and feet, unquenchable thirst, excessive urination, fuzzy vision, chronic fatigue, unusual weight loss or weight gain. Caught early while it is still technically pre-diabetes, the disease is easily manageable and even reversible for many people. Chapter 3 explains everything you need to know to combat pre-diabetes. But if the elevated blood sugar, hyperglycemia, has not been detected and has been allowed to run uncontrolled for years, type 2 diabetes can be devastating. Damage to the tiniest of blood vessels over time invariably leads to any number of complications, resulting in medical problems. These problems can shorten life by as much as 9 years. They include, among others, retinopathy, damage to the retina that can lead to blindness, kidney failure, leading to the need for dialysis, neurological damage, leading to early dementia or cognitive impairment, increased tendency toward atherosclerosis, or so-called hardening of the arteries, resulting in heart disease and stroke, In fact, more than 50% of people with diabetes eventually die of cardiovascular disease.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?